The Mavic Air 2 was a drone that I really liked, but mine sadly passed away during a mission, like a hero. So I was pleasantly surprised to see a new version coming out so soon. In this video I will analyze the main difference between the Mavic Air 2 and the new Air 2S. There are plenty of important new features, so I will concentrate on the video capabilities. I will analyze photography and other aspects very soon. The most spectacular new functionalities are aimed at prosumers who rely heavily on video and photo post-processing. But there are also several improvements targeting occasional users, mostly interested in posting on social media. Out of the box we notice that the dimensions are exactly the same. The only visible differences are the two upward obstacle sensors and the new lens of the 20 megapixel 1-inch camera that looks practically the same as the one of the Mavic 2 Pro, even though it is not marked Hasselblad. It's a bit surprising that DJI has added upward obstacle detection while still lacking the lateral ones, especially for a drone that has excellent tracking capabilities where omnidirectional sensors would be extremely useful. But the 2S has an improved APAS-4 algorithm for detection and avoidance of obstacles. So the new upward sensor might be very useful when the drone has to find its way through trees or other surrounding obstacles. Notice that the sensors are not pointing straight up, but between upwards and forward for a broader range of detection. The Air 2S weighs at 595 grams, only 25 more than the Air 2, and remains below the threshold of 900 grams, which is quite important under European regulations. The remote control looks identical to the one of the Air 2, but it has 4 antennas instead of 2. The batteries are the same as in the Mavic Air 2, and the announced flight time is 31 minutes versus 34 for the previous model. Sadly, there is still no CE marking. The price has been increased to 990 from 790, but as we will see later, the Air 2S has a lot of new, huge features. In many ways it is a different drone, and apparently DJI is not discontinuing the original Mavic Air 2, at least for now. The feel of the 2S in flight is very similar to the Mavic Air 2, just a tiny bit more powerful. The speed has been slightly increased in normal mode, from 12 meters per second to 15, or from 43 kilometers per hour to 54. With the new OcuSync 3 and the 4 antennas, the signal is rock solid, with hardly any latency. The 3-axis gimbal is stabilized with the rock-steady EIS system introduced on the DJI FPV drone. The horizon is always perfectly straight when flying in normal mode. In the FPV gimbal mode, the drone leans to the side when turning, a bit like a real plane. This function was already available in the Air 2, but it feels much more real now, probably because of the new gimbal. The sensor of the 2S is 1 inch, the same size as the one in the Mavic 2 Pro. Much bigger than the half-an-inch Bayer quad of the Air 2. This is of course a major upgrade that should translate into much improved performance in low light and in high dynamic range situations. This is an extreme HDR situation, with a full clear sun before sunset in the image, and very dark shadows in the left part. With previous Mavic drones, I would not even think about attempting a shot of this kind. The camera was set at 5.4 24 frames per second and 10-bit HLG mode, and the result is simply breathtaking. A new standard for prosumer drones. Another thing to notice is the absence of flare. Again, with any other Mavic drone at this angle against the full sun, I would have got very nasty artifacts. The original Air 2 had a HDR video mode that worked quite well in situations of relatively high dynamic range. But in extreme situations like this one, the results were quite poor. Not even remotely comparable to what we are seeing now with the 2S. It is not surprising that DJI has removed the HDR video function, as the 2S frankly doesn't need it. I will analyze in depth the performance of the Air 2S in low light, but this footage taken at ISO 1600 has an incredible detail with hardly any noise at all. The new 1-inch sensor appears to be doing a sensational job. The 2S has a maximum video resolution of 5.4K versus 4K for the Air 2. It is the only model of the Mavic line with a resolution higher than 4K, and this is a huge upgrade. .4K leaves a good deal of room for zooming in and reframing in post-production without loss of quality. Even when delivering footage at 4K. And even when we don't need to zoom, shooting at 5.4K and delivering at 4K gives some extra detail to the final footage. For many users, it is a real game changer. The maximum video bitrate is now 150 Mbps versus 120. A higher bitrate means less compression in the video files, therefore footage taken with the 2S should respond much better to heavy post-processing. Besides the normal mode at 8-bit color, which is also available in the Air 2, the 2S has two 10-bit modes, D-Log and HLG, like the Mavic 2 Pro. This is another massive upgrade. The Mavic Air has its own flutter profile called D-Cine-like, but it is in 8-bit, and it can struggle a bit under heavy post-processing tortures. The 10-bit modes can display over 1 billion colors versus 16.7 million for 8-bit. Therefore, this mode gives much better results in post-production, especially in high dynamic range situations, or when we need to increase contrast. In the 2S, the post-processing with 10-bit footage is rock solid, even when modifying individual colors. No artifacts or color banding of any kind. The 10-bit modes only work with the H.265 codec, which is more demanding in terms of computer resource. Post-processing 5.4K footage at 150 Mbps shot in H.265 requires a good recent processor with a good amount of RAM and a very good graphic card. The time taken to visualize and encode this kind of file on my computer is about 10 times higher compared to 4K files in H.264. Sadly, at 5.4K the intelligent flight modes are not available. I hope it is something that will be added in further firmware upgrades. The ability to shoot 5.4K resolution at 100 Mbps with 10-bit colors opens up new territories for drone videography. But these features are not for beginners or casual users who will be better off using normal H.264 mode. The good news is that the normal mode is also excellent. Even in horrible light conditions, like in this case with plenty of fog, the resulting image is very good and completely noise-free. Normal mode is not overly processed, and this is a good thing. It does need a bit of color grading and some extra contrast to come alive. It is hard to believe how much video quality in the Mavic line has improved in the last 3 years due to new technologies. Like the Air 2, the new model is able to shoot at up to 60 frames per second in 4K, which is extremely useful for slow motion. But note that when shooting in 4K at 60 frames per second, there is a big crop compared to 30 frames per second. Probably only a portion of the sensor is using 60 frames per second. At 5.4, the maximum frame rate is 30 frames per second. At 1080 is 120. The field of view is slightly larger at 22mm equivalent versus 24 for the Air 2. In the Mavic Air 2, the ability to zoom digitally was added by firmware upgrade, and it was able to perform a 2x zoom at 4K and 2.7K, and a 4x zoom at 1080p. I did an in-depth analysis of the digital zoom of the Air 2, and it appeared to give a slightly better quality compared to simply zooming in post-processing, probably due to the ability of the quad-Bayer sensor to split each pixel in 4. The 2S has a deeper zoom capability, 4x at 4K 30 frames per second, and 8 times at 1080p. This is a function aimed mostly at users who don't rely on post-processing, maybe for posting on social media. As in any case, zooming in digitally in post-processing is much more flexible. I am extremely impressed by the Air 2S. It is a quantum leap into new territories for drone videography. Can't wait to analyze other aspects of this drone, especially photography and hyperlapses. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell if you're interested in drone, videography or photography. Bye for now.